Art is beautiful. En nuestra cultura.
I'd like to pass it on like this orally. Although we're going to do some filming and we're going to use some social media, but I got permission from the council that I respond to do it because they feel like now it's important to get this information out. And I'm burning copal, which is what we use in the South instead of cedar or sage. And it's the resin of a tree. And you can smudge yourself if you like. You don't have to. Our group is intertribal, interracial, so we respect all different ways. When we do our Sundance, we use copal. So I know it gives you a lot of energy sometimes. But anyway, I will start, and I will try not to say anything that isn't true, and I will try not to exaggerate. And try to pass this on to you how it was given to me. So when the Kapuli Quecalco came up to this conference I was talking about, Festival of the Winds, they talked about a ceremony that was done. A ceremony that was done 1,200 years before the founding of Mexico City. And it was a ceremony that was done every 1,200 years for Mesoamerica. So it was called the Ceremony of the Four Arrows, and it was done in Quecalco, Mexico, and Quecalco in Nahuatl means serpent. And on Quecalco Mountain, the serpent of the mountain, the serpent of the mountain, there in Quecalco, there was a jade pyramid. And if you climb up the mountain, if you ever get to Quecalco, go up the mountain of the serpent, and on the summit, there's still the remains of the pyramid there. You can see the outlines of it, and there are a few stones. But there, they did this ceremony where they shot 4 arrows in the 4 directions. And then behind each arrow, there were families. And these families took with them, importantly, the 3 sisters: corn, beans, and squash. But they also took the medicines, and they took the herbs that they had, but they also took the mathematics, the social political structure, which is participatory democracy. And they traded. Okay, so they shot the arrows to the east and west. They didn't have far to go, right? They hit the Gulf Coast and the Pacific Ocean. Oh, very importantly, they traveled in spirals. Larger, and so those 2 groups founded their capitals there in the east and west. The group that went south, they hit Nicaragua, which in our language, Nahuatl, is Nicanahuac, which means here's where Nahuatl ends, because that's where they found the confederation of the Inca. And the talk about the eagle and the condor now, which is the idea that indigenous culture stretches the hemisphere. Well, it was the blue condor of the Inca and the red eagle of Anahuac. And Anahuac stretched from Nicaragua all the way up to Canada. But anyway, okay, the most important and the biggest amount of land, of course, was to the north. So they traveled in spirals, and what they would do in their journey, the people that they met, they would exchange what they had. And they would ask the people what they thought and the herbs they had. And they exchanged that way, and they lived with them. Because remember that this was all done by the calendretics of originally the Olmecs, then the Mayas, who developed, if there was ever a culture whose religion was mathematics, it was the Mayan. If you study them, they loved to count, and they counted forward and back. It's just amazing. But anyway, they calculated a calendar that had the orbit of Venus, that had all these amazing calculations of the stars, because they had been watching the stars for thousands of years. So this ceremony was done at the astronomically right time. But they would go and they would live with these people, and then at the right appointed time, they would say, well, now it's time to go on. But say, one of the families had a teenager and they met somebody else and they got married, they had a family, and they say, I'm staying here, I'm not moving on. But maybe some of the new people said, oh, I want to go on. I understand. We're finding out who's on the continent, and we're trading the civilization, indigenous civilization. So the group that went to the north, starting their spiral on the west coast, they went as far as they could up to Canada. When they hit the ice, right, in the snow, they went clear across the continent to the northeast of the United States, and that's where the mound cultures are from. This is the origin of the mound cultures. Now, I used to have friends in history and anthropology, and they go, you know what, Juan, you're right. The mound cultures are Mesoamerican for what we found inside them. But we haven't found the archaeological trail, and they draw a straight line from the northeast to Mesoamerica. Of course, I thought, well, gee, I'm sorry you didn't find the archaeological trail. And they said, well, we're looking for it. But here, the oral tradition explains that it was a spiral. And just a few anecdotes, because I traveled with the Kapuli afterwards, because we tried to retrace the journey. And the Nisqually in Washington State remembered. And they remember, oh yeah, we remember when these people came. And they, we traded, and they lived with us, and then they moved on. And then to my amazement, the Cree, when we were in Alberta, Canada, and the Ermine Skin Band Cree, and it was called the Hobima Reserve, but they've changed the name, and I don't remember what it was. They've changed the name since then. This is like, a while ago. I'm 75, so this is about 35 years ago, something like that. But anyway, they said, we want to take you to a sacred place, and we believe your story. We want to take you to a sacred place. So they took us north of their reserve, and there was a small pyramid. And they said, we remember when these people came. So that was like very exciting for me, because it was confirmation of that story. But they came and they founded the mound cultures. But also when we went to the northeast, we ran into the Iroquois Confederation. And the Mohawks knew about this too. And there was a medicine man, Mad Bear Anderson, that had a deer skin of the journey that the Mohawk would make from the white roots of Peace Tree there in New York, right? New York State, all the way down to Oaxaca, to the Tree of Life in Oaxaca, which is about 300 miles south of Mexico City. So they made a journey there. Of course, they walked. He was saying he thought it took them 7 to 8 years to do it, but it showed where, you know, there was water and there were mountains and, you know, where how they could get down or whatever. But the Mohawk really remembered. And actually, Whitty Hotzitz started Akwesasne Notes, and he called that the new arrow to the north. And they went all around the United States talking to Native people and taking this idea about that the Kapuli's battle cry when they came up was one culture, one continent. So they were saying it was a decolonializing concept, right? Because if you read Western history about us or whatever, we were always fighting each other. We, you know, didn't have much communication. To register as a tribe with the United States, you had to prove that you had your own government, your own language, your own religion. You know, it was this idea of separation. When the reality was that we had sign language here in the north. And that's actually the sign language that deaf people use. It originated with Native American Sign Language. Because you could go anywhere in the North American continent and you could communicate with sign language. They also, you know, how they talk about smoke signals. Well, that was another way of communication. And also the tying of the knots. That wasn't just done in South America. If you read about the Pueblo Revolt, that's how they knew the day to revolt. But anyway, so they continued, right? For 1,200 years. Stopping when they encountered a group of people and then leaving astronomically from the stars. When we went to the Hopi, but that shows you that the Hopi are also connected to that more Mesoamerican culture that's here. But anyway, here we go again. Okay, so they're going, and this is 1,200 years, and that was like hard for me to sink in. But you know, native ceremony takes a long time, and native time is like, you know, which native time? Tomorrow, a week, what we're talking about. But anyway, here I'm getting the true story of Turtle Island. This isn't the Bering Strait or the Western version, which was tainted by the bias of that they wanted to continue that narrative that there weren't hardly any people here. And boy, they weren't cultured, they were savage, and they didn't exploit the land, and you know, that kind of mentality. So they continued in sharing, and this is how the three sisters came to the north. But as I said, it was a give and a take. Even when the Spanish came, and their first encounters, the Mexica asked, well, what do you think about the Creator? What do you believe? Or whatever. They were interested, you know, in what these strangers, what they believed and, you know, where they were from. Of course, the Spanish weren't interested in that. They were just interested in gold. And they didn't care about what the natives thought. But now, maybe after 500 years of sharing this place, you can finally find out what the real history of the people is here. And you know, even the Bering Strait theory was a continuation of that idea. There wasn't culture here. There weren't people here. The first people that came 3,000 years ago from Asia, and not realizing that now there are some sites now that they're saying there's evidence of human activity. that are 200,000 years old now. I mean, it's controversial in anthropology, but it just keeps going back farther and farther. And like I said, they found a couple of footprints out here that they dated to 22,000 years ago. But anyways, you know, they keep going and they keep moving astronomically. Everything was done by the stars. And if you stay for the film, in the film it has a description of the Great Eagle Bowl, what's called the Aztec calendar, and it shows you that there's not a duplicate date. Each date is unique, how their numbering system works. So your day that you were born is unique, and your destiny is unique. And it's kind of like your whole destiny is there. They can do like, they do horoscopes now and do your destiny, except we always had choice. Kind of like what the Christians call that God gave you free will. We always had choice. You weren't forced to do anything that in your mind and in your heart, I don't know, this doesn't feel good to me, this doesn't sound good to me, because in our form of democracy, there was no tyranny of the majority, there was consensus. But that means everybody had to agree. So in, I think, the 4th week, I'll show you how the system works, because it's not an adversarial system. It's not a, you know, let's have a debate and who's the best debater's the winner, or let's have an election and there's a winner and all the rest of you are losers, that kind of mentality. No, it was not that male model of, you know, men like, you know, will get mad and okay, let's get it on, you know, let's fight, you know, and then they get exhausted and then they're friends usually afterwards, hopefully. But that's playing out in Europe right now. It's amazing. That's like a trench war, like World War I over there, you know, and they're moving little by little. But that's the solution in our culture. And it's, you know, you hear about male toxicity. Well, that's really male toxicity war. You know, think of all the resources, the money, not to mention the lies and the misery. You know, I see over there and they level a city and I think, my God, you know, why? Why? But that's how you prove that you're dominant or whatever. Okay, our system was a feminine model. It was a circle. And you had consensus for, you found out what everybody could agree on. And in the council system, you have a chance to speak, right? And in fact, if you have the floor, you could speak for as long as you want. But you're not forced to speak. You know, you're handed a sacred object. And what the elders told me is that's to remind you to tell the truth. But if you don't want to speak, you pass it on and you can listen. And before I went into the council, they said, you know, hey, you're just interpreting again, right? I was an interpreter. So you really don't have anything to say. It was an intertribal elders council. And it was an amazing thing because there were, the Orange Lions was there from the Iroquois Confederation. Thomas Minyaka was there from the Hopi. Philip Deere was there from the Creek Indians. All these, I mean, you probably don't recognize these names of these people, but they're famous elders, right? None of them are here anymore, but they were the elders then. But what amazed me is all the natives, even there were Apache, there were Mexica, there were Yaqui from Mexico. They all knew the system. They all knew that ceremony. They knew how it worked. Because that's the similarities that we had. You know, native culture is diverse. And even within tribes, even within families, they'll do ceremonies and they'll do it a little different. You know, It's like, it's expressive, and it's expressive of who you are and where you are at the time. But it's all based on Mother Earth, on observation of Mother Earth. That's one thing that we have that's similar, is our spirituality and our social-political structure. But there's this, you know, from the Inuit who make their homes out of ice, all the way to the, well, you know, here's how it's separated. And we live in a very special area here in southern Colorado and northern New Mexico, because here where the adobe starts. And also, like the Pueblo, they made permanent housing. You know, their Pueblo over there is thousands of years old, and it's the oldest continuous lived-in structure on the continent. But they do permanent housing, and they have agriculture. The Three Sisters. Plus, they have a real nice connection with the Mexica, because they also have chili, their green chili, which is theirs. That's Pueblo. That's not from Mesoamerica. You know, Three Sisters are, but their chili is theirs here. And it's just, you know, that's why some people come here just for the chili, I think. Because they could have Christmas. Christmas every day. But anyway, so they're going and they're doing this, and some people are staying and some people are leaving, you know, 200 years, excuse me. So here, in the spiral to the north, their city, Chaco Canyon. And this was the giants of Atlan. And, you know, when I was in undergraduate school and a part of the UMass there, we were looking for where could that be? And we figured out, well, you know what, it sounds like it was in New Mexico, but let's say it was the Four Corners area. Because we were thinking about saying, hey, that's our homeland, and here's our historical proof, because they said that. Now, here's one of the theories of where the word Aztec came from. When the Spanish saw that they came from the land of the Red Giants from Atlan, they said, no, that's too much like Atlantis. Because all you have to do is put a TIS right there. So they said, let's put a Z here. And they think that's one of the theories of where the word Aztec comes from. And the Chicano movement didn't know that. My teacher spoke Nahuatl. That was his mother tongue. So he's the one said, no, it's not Aztlan. You know, you see this Aztlan around every now and then in the Southwest. But it's not Aztlan, it's Atlan. But anyway, you know, maybe someday I'll confront that, but I got a lot of Chicano brothers that they'll freak out if you tell them that's not right. But part of this is what's happening now is that Native communities are sharing their oral traditions and remembering the past and remembering that we weren't warlike. And just within the last 5 years, they found out that there's hundreds of miles of road around Chaco Canyon. And when they, you know, through the new kind of imaging and being able to see through things or whatever, the engineers that found the road too said that what was remarkable was how straight the lines were. And also when I taught, there was a controversy about, because some people said that there were 4-story structures at Chaco Canyon, but there were some anthropologists that said, no, adobe can't handle that much weight, and that, you know, they just built with adobe, they weren't sophisticated or whatever, but just within the last few years, and, you know, I'm kind of old, so a few years is 5-10 years for me, but recently they found out that, yes, they did have 4-story structures at Chaco. And also the historians, the anthropologists are saying, well, it was also a place where different peoples would come together and do ceremony together. Well, see, that was the people on the four arrows were mixed linguistically and culturally. So that's one of the reasons that they would be okay with intertribal ceremony. It was like a university, they're saying Chaco Canyon was. And, you know, so they set up their beautiful capital there, right? But at the appointed time, astrologically, they knew they were supposed to go back to the Valley of Mexico. Now, in the history books, they call them the Chichimeca. And when I first read it, it kind of confused me because they said they were like the barbarians, you know, and they dressed different and they spoke different languages. Well, sure they did, because they were these people, you know, they had gone through the whole thing, and of course they spoke different languages and dressed differently. But anyway, it was there from Chaco Canyon where the historians call the Chichimeca. They weren't the Mexica yet, because I'll tell you that story in a second, but when they left, that's, you know, they went back down, and they're, you know, we didn't have gods like they say, you know, and Huitzilopochtli, which when I first encountered, they said, oh, Huitzilopochtli is the god of war. And Huitzilopochtli in Nahuatl means hummingbird to the left. Why is the hummingbird to the left? What is that? But anyway, they said, well, you know, now in academia, for a while they were saying, well, no, he wasn't the god of war. He was the force of human will. Because for the Mexica, and if you come to our Sundance here, which is in June, the end of June, I think Tree Day is the 28th, but anyway, you'll hear Mexica Tiawi for the dancers dancing inside. They'll shout that out, and that means Mexica forward, because that's what the people said when they came down. Tiawi forward, we got to keep moving. You know, even though there's a little water, and it was a crazy journey down. I won't go into that. If you want to tell me, you want to catch me sometime, I can go into that. But it was, they were following the lead of Huitzilopochtli, and Tenoch was the leader, and that was the name of the city, Mexico Tenoch Titlan. And they, you know, the name is city after Tenoch. But anyway, when they got back to the valley, the older cultures there had forgotten about that ceremony. Or they, you know, some people kind of knew, but they, oh, look at these people, you know, where we're going to put them, you know, or whatever. And they told him, well, you know, you can go off to the lake there in the swamps. Because nobody wanted, but for them, it was fine. Because there were snakes and fish and prickly pear cactus, you know. And they said, well, there's plenty of food here. So they were there, and when they got there, they saw the eagle on the cactus. And Tenoch said, here's the sign. Here's where we will found our capital. There was not a snake in the capital, in the eagle's mouth. The glyph that they saw, that they showed the Spanish on the side, was the glyph, the symbol for burning water, transformation, right? And it's like this. So it looked like a snake. And the Spanish, I guess, said, well, let's throw that snake in the eagle's mouth. But the original was just the eagle on the cactus. And when Tenoch saw it, or they saw it, he said, here, this is a sign from Huitzilopochtli. By the way, hummingbird to the left refers to your heart, which is, you don't want your heart to stop, right? It's the idea of movement forward. So that's what hummingbird to the left is for us, is your heart just keeps going all the time, like a hummingbird. So that's what that idea is, along with a lot of attributes that the hummingbird has. But to know it's said to the people. All right, now that we've seen the sign from Huitzilopochtli, we are going to dress the same. And we are going to speak the same language. And we will call ourselves the Mexica, which means cosmic citizen. And the reason that they said that, they were reflecting on all the peoples of the North. They were a mixture of that. So that's where they founded their city. And here, before I talk a little bit more about the city, I want to talk about how it was set up in Capulis. Because they were not related, they said, look, instead of doing the council system by blood or relation, let's do it as like-minded people. So you could have a spiritual Capuli, you could have a merchant Capuli, an architectural Capuli, whatever you want. Sometimes when I'm talking at universities, they'll say, you could have a hedge fund Capuli, which maybe might not work. But anyway, yeah, it's a system. It's a Native American system, but the Mexica said, well, instead of making it like through clan and blood, let's make it as like-minded people. And that's why we feel we are the Capuli Taos, and we feel that this system is for the cosmic citizen. And when they were saying that, they meant everybody. Because Native people knew that we orbited the sun, not the other way around. When I went to grade school, I learned that the Arabics invented the zero. That's where algebra comes from, or whatever. Now, my kids learn that no, it was the Mayas about 900 years earlier. The mathematics is amazing. They just found that it's an 800 and some year count in the calendar that you have to go out that many years to actually coordinate the orbit of Venus, the orbit of Mars, the Pleiades, and all the other things that they have in there, in that calendar. It's a mandala, and it's a medicine wheel, and it's a calendar, and it's a way of life. But anyway, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to say, hey, you know, we're all stardust. So instead of pretending that there's these different races, and some races are superior to others, and you know, men are inferior to women, or women are superior to men, or whatever. Hey, we're all one human family living on Mother Earth. And it's a time now that the elders said this is a time of prophecy and change. And you know, in 2012, how they said, oh, the end of the world, the Mayan calendar's ending, or whatever. It was like, I talked to some Mayan friends of mine, they go, no, the count just starts again. And this is the 6th sun, because there's 5 suns in there, a 72-year period of time. But this new sun now is our sun, and it's the indigenous sun. And for the elders that I talk to, they say, you know, now we're going to gain a different kind of consciousness. And, you know, when they used to tell me that, I thought, oh, that'll be nice or whatever. But now I realize that that's crucial. It's imperative that humanity kind of lifts up its game in consciousness so we can solve these problems that we've created. You know, I was talking about the council and how important truth is. Well, Vine DeLorean, who's an excellent native scholar, did research to find out that the worst punishments weren't for murder or robbery, they were for lying. Because native spirituality is, and culture is built on the truth. They call it the light. My teacher used to say, the red road is the road towards the light, but that light is the truth. And think about the age we live in, where it's the big lie and misinformation or whatever. We don't have the truth. So how are we gonna provide for our children? How are we gonna make sure that the community's okay? So the Kapuli is, and a Kapuli is self-sufficient, independent, and self-governing. That's any clan, tribe, nation, or confederation. That's what they are. You know, it's just voiced in the Kapuli. And it's because it was a new kind of construct. And because Mexico Tenochtitlan was an urban setting. In fact, that's another argument they had, that academia has. And now they're saying, well, it was one of the biggest cities in the world at that time. But there's some scholars saying, no, it was the biggest city in the world at that time. And if you want to read about what that city was like, read Castillo's book, The Conquering of New Spain. He was an actual conquistador, and he describes coming over the hill and seeing the city. And some of the conquistadors who were mercenaries, who'd been all over Europe fighting or whatever, they thought they were hallucinating. All Mesoamerican cities had urban planning. It wasn't, oh, here's the king castle, and then everybody just live around it. No, it was, the roads were planned, the buildings were planned, and they reflected the stars. They reflected the cosmos, cosmic citizen. The indigenous philosophy of life is a cosmic philosophy. It isn't a Western existential, there's no way out and my life is meaningless kind of a philosophy. It's that you are connected to the whole universe. And the universe is connected or has a relationship with you. It's like a two-way street, right? You belong, you're part. My teacher used to say, the body of the Creator is the universe, and you're inside that body. You're part of that creation. See, that's also a native way of thinking. Just like we're part of the earth. You know, we're part of the system of having air to breathe and food to eat and water to drink. And what are we doing? We're poisoning all of it. You know, in that council system I talked about, one of the rules is, before you make a final decision, you go and you sleep on it and you think how it's going to affect 7 generations in the future. You know, I don't even know how that's possible, because for us, you know, I think about my kids. I have some grandkids now, but that's 2 generations, you know, and that's, you know, I'm worried about them and how the world's going, but they thought 7 generations. Think if we did that, would we have the problems with pollution we have now? Would we have thought about social media and how it was going to affect 7 generations in the future, and maybe, you know, regulated it more and said, you know, let's do this so it doesn't hurt our children? You know, what about gasoline? You know, it sounded great, just like asbestos, but it's poisoning the air. It's, you know, it's like this isn't sustainable. But native culture is sustainable, and it has a historical model that goes back thousands of years. And if you want to see it, go to the Pueblo. They're still growing their crops, they're hunting in their mountain, they're building out of adobe, and the only carbon footprint they have is what's been brought to them from the outside. They're an example. You know, it's kind of funny because I hear people here, oh, we're going to do super adobe and we got to live sustainably or whatever. How are we going to do that or whatever? Look at the Pueblo. You know, another thing too that the Pueblo have, like I was talking before, here's special, because this was the gateway to the plains. and talking to some Pueblo elders. No, the Mexica were the last one we traded with. We used to trade with Mesoamerica long before the Mexica came around. Their ceremonies are thousands of years old, and if you go to their ceremonies, you'll see macaw feathers. You'll see parrot feathers, and when they do their turtle dance, they like the big sea turtle shells, you know, not the little turtle shells, because it's a better aesthetic, I guess. But anyway, that's proof about the trading routes here. And then they told me that they used to trade with the Mexica here, and then they would go to where the Cherry Creek meets the Platte, Denver, because that was a huge trading area that all the Plains Indians would come to trade. So the Pueblo would take the stuff they traded with Mesoamerica there, and that kind of trade existed all the way through Canada and around. Anahuac was like half of the United States up to Canada, all of Mesoamerica, to Nicaragua, Nicanahuac. Here's where Anahuac ends, and there to South America. So when the Capuli came up, they thought, well, and their battle cry was one culture, one continent. We're the same, they're saying. Yeah, we'll do different movements in our ceremony, we dress differently. You know, you guys live in teepees, you guys live in adobe, you guys have long houses, whatever. But our basic spirituality and social political structure, participatory democracy is the same. And we found, because my teacher went to Colombia and talked to the Mamus of the Ica, there were 4 groups that left Colombia, went on up. The most famous is the Kogi, the elder brother. There's a book and there's some documentaries about that. About 30 years ago, they opened up their gates because they wanted to tell the younger brother, which is everybody else, whatever you're doing, you need to stop because we're seeing the effects here. And they live on top of the mountains. And if you read about the Kogi, the last part of it says, well, if you want to meet the Kogi, they don't want to meet you, so you don't have any, you don't have a chance to meet them because they have no tourism and their land is locked. And luckily I got to go there after my teacher died because they honored him as a Mamu and honored him. And, you know, some other time, if you want to, I'll tell you that story. But anyway, this is the message of our Capuli, this group. We're the farthest group, Capuli, in the north here. You know, we can go on down. There's Capulis all over the southwest. You'll run into them, you know. A lot of them obscure, but we wanted to do a traditional Capuli where we live together and we want to find out how do we live sustainably, independent, and govern ourselves. And we feel like that we can be an example of that. And like I said, we're intertribal, interracial. And one of my teacher's messages was, again, we're one human family living on Mother Earth. You know, you can't get away from that. Even though there's wood here or whatever, we're on top of it. Even though they put asphalt, you're on top of it. You know, we live in a wonderful place here where you can go on hikes and see the sunset or see the sunrise, and you really get that hit from Mother Nature and just the beauty. You know, this spirituality, I tell people, you know, if you just want to go out into her and feel that spiritual ecstasy of just being and just how beautiful she is, the spirituality teaches you how to love her. You know, she's there saying, I had one medicine man, he saw a movie about, they shot a guy, you know, it was a space movie, and they shot a guy into space because he died. And he goes, oh my God, how sad. He says, because, you know, that person won't be able to go back to their mother. She's there saying, come back, daughter. Come back, son. I'll put my arms around you. You know? And for us, we don't believe in death. There's just transformation. Our spirit doesn't die. And we believe everything has a spirit. Even the rock people, even what Western culture sees as inanimate, not living things, well, the molecules in there are moving. You know? And for us, for the sweat lodge and certain ceremonies, the rock people are really important. They're very important. And the tree people. And you know, like I said, we call the four-leggeds our cousins. We know that we're related to them. You know, we share those genes with them. Not with our computers or phones. No, but with all the things that are alive around us. So, that's the message of our organization. And like I said, that information came through me through the elders, and I have permission to spread it because they said now's the time to tell everyone. But they also said, when you finish, you tell people, the people that you talk to, don't take my word for it. The Creator gave you a mind. Use it. Do your own investigation. Make up your own mind. Because native spirituality isn't about groupthink. You know, you always have a right to think differently. You have a right to be different. I like to use the example of Crazy Horse. There's a biography of him by Maria Santos. I think it was done in the 1920s or 30s, where she got to interview his family and people that knew him. And one of his nicknames was our strange young man. Because like for certain ceremonies or feast days and even the Sundance, he went off by himself. And they said, we don't know what he did. Maybe he just went and he camped out. Maybe he did his own Sundance or whatever, but he didn't participate. Another nickname was Curly, which maybe means he had some European mix, you know? So he's an example of that. He had a choice. You have a choice if somebody asks you to be in ceremony. And you can say respectfully no. No, you know what, I'll help the firekeeper, or I'll help out with water, I'll help here, I'll be part of the security. But you're not forced. You know, you're not forced. It's not about groupthink. It's not like how we like to think about, well, let's all hold hands and we'll go to heaven. No, your red road is yours. And like I said before, your relationship to the creation is yours. It's unique. And we believe, well, some of the elders I have, and I believe this, is that, yeah, your consciousness goes out there and it becomes that, unites with the Creator's consciousness, and it's that cosmic consciousness. I had an elder say to me one time, Juan, you know what you got to do? You got to get your mind in tune with Mother Nature's mind, because her mind is in tune with the whole cosmos. Well, thank you, and I hope you stay for the film. And, you know, we've got another talk about the structure of the Kapuli and about the structure of the council. And I forget what the other topic is, but thank you for coming. And please tell other people. That's part of this process, you know? We just throw a pebble in, it makes a little ripple, but that ripple grows. So that's, you know, that's all I ask. And thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the film.
Thank you. Thank you, Juan. Thank you. Thank you very much.